Let's imagine a world with no science at all, where thousands of years of discovery simply never happened. How then would we explain our world, expose its mechanisms, actions, and origins? And how would we create all the technology that we take for granted? Hardware, software, healthcare. Because none of this would exist, of course. And how would we understand that most powerful device, the human brain? How it works, and why does it sometimes not work? Who would we turn to for answers to the many challenges that face mankind? And that starry sky, what's up there? Aren't you curious? The questions are limitless. So aren't you glad that there is a place where people are asking them? Scientific and technological breakthroughs only exist because of basic scientific research. And at the forefront of global basic research is the Weizmann Institute of Science. For 70 years, Weizmann researchers have been asking questions most of us can't even imagine. Their curiosity led to the creation of Israel's first computer, one of the first in the world. It was a Weizmann scientist who worked on the algorithm that makes your online transactions secure today, discovered the life-changing multiple sclerosis drug, Copaxone, and created new cancer-fighting treatments. And today, Weizmann scientists are creating DNA-based computers so tiny, 1 trillion can fit in a drop of water, using quantum electronics to build supercomputers, developing intelligent materials inspired by nature, and exploring the limitless potential of machine learning and artificial intelligence. They are finding clues to our changing climate and protecting our planet's resources for the future. They are combating disease with powerful diagnostic tools, drugs, and therapies, and they are teaching the next generation to dream, to think, and discover. Looking back, we owe the greatest milestones of human achievement to our curiosity. Each of us must do all that we can to ensure that the trajectory and pace of discovery never falters. If we want the best of human existence to be ahead of us, we need basic scientific research to take us there.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Susan Stern, and I have the privilege of being CEO of Weizmann Canada, and I'm thrilled that so many people have chosen to spend the next 45 minutes or so with us. Thank you. We are constantly bombarded with information, and it's so hard to know what to believe. Can we catch the virus walking outside, reading the newspaper? Will we have a vaccine soon? Can we enjoy life and still stay safe? I know that all of you believe, as I do, that information is empowering, and that's what today is all about. We trust science. As you saw in the video, the key to new discoveries is curiosity-driven basic science. On my very first visit to the Weizmann campus, I was struck by the power of basic research. Scientists pulling back all the layers and trying to understand fundamental questions in nature. Adding to that, the multidisciplinary approach, which has been the very DNA of Weizmann from the beginning. Scientists looking at the same problem through different lenses always leads to the development of new knowledge, and from that, something extraordinary that we could have never imagined at the start. The Weizmann Institute is uniquely positioned to make a significant impact on coronavirus discoveries. Since February, the Institute has ramped up from 1 lab studying coronavirus to now over 65 labs aimed at making a significant impact on solving the pandemic. More efficient testing, identifying novel targets for drug design, data-driven answers to reopening society and restarting the economy, and even the development of dynamic resources in science education for students, parents, and teachers. In addition, the Institute has established a new Center for Research on Infectious Diseases. As we know, the world was not prepared for this pandemic, and we want to ensure that not only will we make a significant impact in solving this crisis on the global front, but also be ready for the future. This new initiative involves a range of Weitzman scientists who are advancing the understanding of and mitigating infectious agents related to coronavirus and other infectious diseases, and translating insights gained from the ongoing intense fight against coronavirus into knowledge for combating a whole spectrum of pathogens. We're very fortunate to have with us today two leaders in the field of science and medicine and a nurse who's on the front lines of patient care. We will learn together about the basics of a virus. What's unique about this virus? Why do some people get very sick and others not? When can we expect to have a vaccine? A cure? What can we learn through this pandemic? Dr. Noam Stern-Ginossar completed her BSc in biology magna cum laude at the Hebrew University in 2002 and her MSc in 2005 at the Hadassah School of Medicine at Hebrew University. She was awarded a PhD in immunology with distinction there in 2009 and went on to conduct her postdoctoral training at the University of California in San Francisco. She joined the Department of Molecular Genetics at the Weitzman Institute in 2014 and currently heads the American Committee for the Weitzman Institute's 70th anniversary laboratory. We're thrilled to have so many members of the Aquis family joining us today. Thank you. Noam is an expert on viruses. She studies how they invade healthy cells and take over the cell system to survive and reproduce. She says viruses can be ill-mannered guests, freely helping themselves to the host cell machinery and using it to make more viruses. Her PhD work on the herpes virus was selected as one of the notable scientific advances of 2007 from the very prestigious journal Nature. Using genetic deep sequencing, she has also discovered hundreds of previously undiscovered virus-produced mRNAs that can lead to exciting advances in managing viruses. As a result of her impressive career, Noam has earned numerous academic and professional honors, including the Israeli National Postdoctoral Award for Advancing Women in Science in 2010, a unique program that has made a significant impact in creating and maintaining a gender balance at the highest level of academia. Because, let's face it, men and women think differently and work differently, and balance is crucial for the development of new knowledge. We've seen many examples illustrating the importance of that balance recently in all aspects of this crisis. Speaking of talented men and women, I'm honored to introduce you to our moderator for today, Dr. Adrian Langleben. Adrian is a Montreal physician who was trained at McGill University and at Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York City. He holds many esteemed positions, including oncologist at the Jewish General and St. Mary's Hospitals. He's also an associate professor, senior medical oncologist of the McGill University Head and Neck Oncology Program. He's the director of the Department of Oncology at St. Mary's Hospital, as well as being an attending physician in the Department of Medicine, Hematology and Medical Oncology at Santa Cabrini Hospital. Dr. Langleben describes himself as a fervent admirer of the Weitzman Institute. As such, he serves on the Scientific Advisory Committee for Weitzman Canada, is a major supporter of the Weitzman Institute, and regularly visits the campus, including giving talks to groups of scientists. We're so grateful that he's taking time to be with us to moderate this important discussion. We will now have a brief presentation by Noam, followed by a panel discussion, which will take us from the bench to the bedside, and ample time for all of your questions. Please email them to jan@weitzman.ca. And now, let's talk science.
So hi, it's nice being with you here today, and I'll talk about viruses. So first, what is actually the meaning of virus? The virus in Latin, the word means poison, and it was coined for the first time by Louis Pasteur when he was trying to understand what caused the rabies disease. So he knew he can transfer the material, but he could not see it by the microscopes he had, and so that's why he called it poison or virus.
A virus is not really a living organism. It's just a genetic material, either DNA or RNA, surrounded by a protein coat that can replicate. And this is what we call a virus. All viruses have a receptor on their envelope, and they can recognize their host cell and get into it. And then by different mechanisms, they can make the host cell replicate the genome, generate viral proteins, and basically make the cell a viral factory that will now generate hundreds or thousands of new viruses that will bud out the cells and will infect new cells. So this is the common thing for all viruses.
Viruses are found all around us. They are not rare, although we hear them on the news just now. And they can actually infect diverse organisms. All organisms are infected with viruses. And we actually carry out hundreds of viruses inside of us all the time, every day. And viruses can even infect bacteria. So bacteria have viruses that are taking over them. And so what is a virus? Viruses can come in different shapes and flavors. We think about them as small things, but there are actually huge variabilities in how they look and in their sizes. So there are giant viruses and there are really small viruses. Of course, all of them are in the end very small. And what is a virus? Virus is actually divided by two categories, dividing them to 4 different groups. The first category is what's the genetic material. It could be either the RNA or the DNA. And so we have RNA viruses like the coronaviruses that are now famous, but we also have viruses that their genetic material is DNA, like herpes viruses, which are viruses that infect us all the time. And then the second division is actually about the shape of the virus. So the genetic material could be either packed in a protein shell, and then we call it non-enveloped virus. An example for that is the polio virus. Or it can also be packed in a membrane around it, and then we call it an enveloped virus. And the coronaviruses we all hear about now are enveloped virus. So the coronavirus is actually an RNA enveloped virus.
Flu is an RNA minus virus and coronavirus is an RNA plus virus. This actually means that the replication cycle will be very different when they go into the cell, and the way they will hijack the cell machinery will be different. So for example, coronavirus never gets into the nucleus of the cell, where is all the genetic material of the cell lays in, whereas influenza virus actually does get there. So corona can do what it's doing in the cytosols because it's actually a much bigger virus that comes with more of its machineries.
So what happens when a coronavirus infects a cell? The first step is actually the recognition, and the SARS-CoV-2, the virus that caused the COVID-19 pandemic, can recognize a receptor on the cell surface of some of our cells, which is called ACE2. So this is a protein that has its own function, and SARS-CoV-2 just learned to identify it and use it to get into our cells. Once this recognition occurs, the virus can inject its genetic material. In the case of SARS-CoV-2, this is the RNA. And then this RNA will be recognized by the cellular machinery that can convert RNA into protein. So this is what you will see here. The RNA will be injected into the cell, and then our ribosomes, which are the main machinery of the cell, will convert this RNA into many, many viral proteins, which are these hollow dots. And these proteins will be actually the machinery that will take over our cell. So what we wanted to know is actually which proteins are actually being made from the SARS-CoV-2 genome, so from the virus that is now causing the COVID-19 pandemic. And the way we do it, we take cells in the lab and we infect them with SARS-CoV-2. And then we use a unique machinery that allows us to look at what the ribosomes are translating. So we are looking at the ribosome, at the machinery itself that converts mRNA, RNA into proteins. And just by looking at the ribosome, we can see which viral proteins are being generated. And these are the colors, the different dots that you see here are representing different viral proteins that the ribosome are translating. And because we look at the ribosome, we can actually really quantify how much is being generated from each of the viral proteins. So SARS-CoV-2 have 12 proteins that we know about, and we can use our measurement to see what's the relative expression? How much each protein is being made? So this is, each viral protein is shown here in a different color. And you can see that, for example, the yellow protein, which is the nucleocapsid protein, is the most abundant protein. It's actually generated much more than, for example, the green protein, which is the RNA polymerase. And why is this important? First, it tells us something about the way the virus works. But second, it can also really help us with diagnostic, because in diagnostic, we want to detect the virus. And if we know to aim it to the most abundant proteins that are generated in the largest amount, it can help the sensitivity of the diagnostic. Another thing we can do with the method is actually ask, are there any other viral proteins that are being made besides these 12 proteins that were mostly mapped by conservation analysis? And so when we are doing it, we actually discovered there are 20 more viral proteins SARS-CoV-2 can generate, and this is again illustrated by these colorful dots. You can just see the ribosomes are translating these proteins from the SARS-CoV-2 genome. And why is this important? So first, it can allow us to really now functionally dissect what each of the viral protein is doing to the cell. And so this is very important for understanding the pathogenesis of SARS-CoV-2. And second, for example, one of these proteins we identified is really conserved in all SARS-like viruses, which is suggesting an important and central function in viral pathogenesis and potentially a new target for therapeutic, which is really the center of the worldwide efforts that are now being done in many labs in the world.
We know what needs to be done, and this virus is not going to be very difficult to get a vaccine against. It just takes a lot of time. You need to do all the clinical trials. You need to move to mass production, and these processes take a long time. And the principle in vaccine is quite simple. We basically inject to the body something from the virus. And then our immune system sees this virus, it learns to recognize different proteins or signatures and develop antibodies against these features. And now when we will meet the real pathogen, we already have these antibodies that will help our cells to fight infection and basically increasing the likelihood we will win the virus. I would just want to emphasize that even if we are not vaccinated, eventually most of the people will develop this immunity. So what vaccine is actually doing is just helping us to do it in advance. And then our response is just much, much stronger and quicker, and we prevent the disease symptoms.
Thank you so much for that great presentation, Noam. I love the way you take complex science and make it accessible for us. It's very empowering. And we all have new information to share with family and friends. I would like to ask Dr. Adrian Langleben to join us for a panel discussion, which will be followed by a Q&A. In addition to all the other positions I mentioned in the introduction, Adrian is also the Director of Oncology at the Lakeshore General Hospital and is joining us from there, along with Josie El-Kahi, who is an oncology pivot nurse at the Lakeshore General. We've already received many great questions via email, so keep them coming, and I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Langleben.
Hi, good afternoon or good evening, depending on what side of the ocean you're on. The discussion that we heard before is a really excellent introduction to the biology of this virus. And what I thought I would do is ask you how you feel when the virus is drawn and it's so pretty on the screen, and yet it does so much damage to us. You'd think it should be made to look like a vampire or something. We're talking across the world, and we're talking about a disease that's, for the first time in most people's memory, affected the world. And I think it'd be very interesting if you could give us a brief perspective, not so much as a scientist, but as a citizen of the world, how you feel this has impacted your society, so that people in Canada and listening to this get a feel for whether we're similar, whether we're behind you, whether we're in front of you in the trajectory of the disease?
Sure, thank you, Adrian. So first, I want to defend viruses. Now they are bad, but sometimes they're actually also good. And in research, for example, we have a lot of useful uses for viruses. And so, we should learn, they could be friends and they could be enemies. They have two sides of the coin. And regarding how we cope with the situation in Israel, so we had a very relatively easy first wave because our government responded really quickly and basically closed all the flights into Israel and also did a very quick closure of almost all activities. And so we had few tough months, for me, staying at home with the kids. I think this is true for a lot of people. And also economy-wise, I mean, we are in the academia are less affected, but there were a lot of people that lost their jobs or, went on leave with no clear date when they are coming back. And then I think because of this pressure, we opened up very, very quickly with not a lot of control. The kids went back to daycares and schools. So again, for me personally, life was almost as usual. And there was hope that the economy will recover. But I think what's going on now is that we are really into a very serious second wave and not clear how we are going to get out of it. So it's really now changing every day, like what will be the next regulation and how all of us will be affected. So I think everyone here right now really worried on so many different levels, economy and what will be the kids and how we will survive the summer. And Israel is so hot and humid, so it's like staying at home is tough. And so I think we are like everyone else in the world.
I was just going to say that sounds very similar to the discussions that we're having now. So you're sort of at an institution that's at the forefront of this science, and you're one of the leaders of that effort to understand this virus in order to be able to develop therapies for it.
Right.
We hear about drugs, we hear about vaccines, we hear about interventions that people themselves can do. What's your gut feeling about interventional drugs like antivirals and vaccines to start with?
Okay, so let's start with the antiviral. Well, let's start with that there is really a huge scientific worldwide effort to try and solve this problem. And that's why in the end of the day, I'm optimistic because we'll have, tough times ahead of us, but this is not going to be like that forever. We will solve it. We solved even more complicated problems in the past. It just takes time, and science is not done in a day. And so I think there are two major routes of scientific efforts. The first is to try and get an antiviral drug. And since we don't have any drug available, FDA drug available for coronaviruses, then people are trying to see, can we repurpose drugs that are already approved to fight coronaviruses? And it's done in so many different levels, from screens of available drugs to use the most advanced technology to see which human genes and pathways are important for the virus, and then testing if we can target them, looking at the viral proteins and analyzing exactly where they go, what they do, what they touch, and to try and see, can we target that? And it's done in so many different labs. So, I think we'll get something. I don't think drugs will solve the problem, but they can help in therapy. And I think even now in Israel, we see in the second wave that the disease is a little bit less serious. And the virus is exactly the same. So it's not the disease is less serious, it's that the doctors already have a little bit of knowledge about what the right treatment and when to treat and what to treat. So I think this will have slow advancement in how to deal with patients. And then the second front, which is I think the most important front, is vaccines. And again, there is a worldwide effort to develop a vaccine. And I think for any other virus until today, there was always one company that tried to develop something, went to a clinical trial, it worked, it didn't work. If it worked, they got it. If they didn't, then maybe a few years later, there was a second company that tried to develop something. And now we really have all the possible designs that one can even dream about. And most of them are already in clinical trials. So I'm confident as much as I can be confident as a scientist that we will solve it, but it will take some time. Clinical trials are not things that are done, you need to get the vaccine and test if a person gets infected, and these things take time, and you want to make sure the vaccines are safe. And so it will take time, but it will be solved. I'm optimistic.
In your work and the work of other scientists at the Weizmann, are there leading lights that you'd like to briefly comment on in these areas?
So specifically our work, I feel is really at the basic level that will give information to other people that can then be used to potentially find new therapies or new directions or new sensitivities. We are also doing some small efforts, but this is really small. There are several labs in the Institute that are trying direct treatments or drugs. So I think most of you probably heard about ACE2, which is the human protein that is expressed on cells in our body that is used by the virus to get into the cells. And there's a group in the Weizmann Institute, and there are groups all over the world that are trying to basically develop something that will block this interaction. And again, this is something that is completely feasible and can work. And I think we have 2 or 3 groups that are working on different strategies how to do it. We also have groups, and that's another line of therapy, again, here at the Institute, but also worldwide, trying to isolate, so taking people that were exposed to the coronavirus, they recovered, and then we can look at their antibodies that they have against the virus and isolate antibodies that can, again, block the infection. And if these antibodies are efficient, we can actually now, these days, produce antibodies and use it as another line of treatment. And again, in the Institute, we have a group that is doing it, and there are some already antibodies that are, I think, in clinical trials to see if they help. So they are not going to solve the problem. It's again, and more potential therapies that will get in and will help to decrease the disease and the consequences of getting infected.
So I'd like to jump for a moment because I have Josie sitting next to me, and I just want to describe what one does on a practical level in terms of taking care of patients who have cancer at this time of high risk before the vaccines are developed. So I'm going to pull back, and Josie's going to come up to the screen so we don't have an echo.
So we work in cancer care with cancer patients undergoing chemotherapy and immunotherapies, all kinds of therapies. So it's already a very stressful time for them, for sure, just to have the diagnosis and the treatment plan. How we have protected them is, in addition to the security that we have at the front door of the hospital, before they can come into our oncology clinic, they are screened for symptoms of COVID-19. And if we pick up on anything that is suspect, then they are not allowed into the door of the clinic. They are seen in another room that is then promptly decontaminated, of course. So we are here at the Lakeshore General Hospital, where we are a designated COVID hospital. Therefore, we are in a red zone. And we have managed to keep our oncology patients in a green zone. We don't have any documented cases of our patients becoming positive for COVID-19. So we're very proud of that. And we continue to offer, supportive care to our patients in the situations where they're now coming to appointments alone without the support of their family, which is, really quite significant. And as I say, in an already very stressful situation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the reason that this type of discussion, I think, was very important is because there's a debate in the world about what we should be doing to minimize the transmission of this virus or the risk of the virus until the vaccines and until the drugs become available. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, most of us believe that we should have, by early 2021, initial viral vaccine data that one will be able to see large vaccination programs emerging, and potentially also antiviral drugs to complement the vaccines. And so the question is, what do we do until then? Because unfortunately, the issue of what we should do, and I'm going to use two terms, masks and social distancing, have become political. And they're different all over the world. And from a scientific point of view, what's your feeling about these things?
So first, I want to say that we are still learning, right? So I think every scientist will agree that we need masks and we need social distancing. And I think we should separate for a second between these two, because mask, it's very easy to explain. We need to wear masks. If everyone will wear masks, then we can prevent infection, and there is no cost or substantial cost in wearing masks. I think that, exactly. I also have one here, but I won't take it. And I think at least in the Institute and where I'm walking around, people use masks. I mean, of course, not all the time, and it's hot, and someone starts clicking on the phone, so it takes the mask off, but we should all make an effort to wear masks. But this is one thing. I think the problem comes with the word social distancing. So what does this mean? And I mean, we know it means 2 meters away, but can we go to restaurant? Can we go to the swimming pool? Can the kids go to daycare? Can the kids go to schools? And so here it's a trial and error. And I think every country will eventually have to find the right balance that will allow it to keep the numbers low, but still have some level of economical activity. I don't think it's realistic, for example, to keep the schools completely closed until a vaccine shows up.
Yeah.
So we need to try and error, we need to wear masks, and we need to learn when to go back in organized way and learn what was like. And I think this is what Israel did so badly. So we were really low in numbers, and instead of opening up gradually and seeing when the numbers are starting to go up again and then stop and go one step back and try and error until you get to the point that in this specific country, in this specific culture, in this specific population composition, ages and everything, you get to a number of patients that you can manage. And it's not a clear answer where this line is. I think it's clear from looking at countries around the world that it could be done. And so we just need to be patient and in a way obedient. And I think it's also a lot of politics going in, because you need to trust your leaders, and they are not necessarily worth this trust.
For a moment, we're going to take the politics out of it. I just want to show people how they're supposed to wear a mask. You wear a mask like this. You don't wear a mask like that. You don't wear a mask like that. Okay, it's supposed to cover your mouth and your nose. So I want to go back to the science for a moment.
Okay.
There are two major worries that people have. The first is, really, how bad is this virus? Is it as bad as the Spanish flu virus that some people heard stories about 100 years ago? Is it no worse than the flu? And I don't believe either of those two statements. I'm just raising those because that's what people say. In your guess, where would you, your estimation, more than a guess, where would you put the virulence of this virus?
It's not a guess. I think this is something that in the beginning was a guess. Now we have pretty good knowledge of the virulence, and it's probably somewhere in the middle. And I think actually this is the danger. The danger is because I think if it was super, super virulent, people would just stay at home, right? Like they will not, or if it would have affected kids, I mean, luckily it's not, but if it would have, then people would have been much, much more careful. So I think the problem is that it's somewhere in the middle. It's not flu, so we cannot ignore it. We have to fight it much more aggressively with masks, with social distancing, with damage to the economy, because we can't let it just go, do its thing. And we can see it from a lot of countries why we can't do that. And on the other hand, it's very hard for relatively mild disease, or at least relatively mild disease to certain parts of the population, to completely halt the economy and the activity for a year. So I think the virus is somewhere in the middle, and different countries need to find where they can, find the right balance between doing everyday activities and keeping the numbers low.
So the other thing is that with the flu, the regular flu, up till now, maybe in the future, we won't have to worry about this, but the flu changes every year. And the vaccine that you had last year may not protect you against the flu of the next year. With this particular virus, there are a bunch of topics being discussed among scientists and lay people. The first is, if you have the flu, if you have the COVIDs, pardon me, do you become immune to it? Can you get it again? What happens when your antibody titer, your level goes away? If that's the case, how effective will the vaccines be? Are you able to comment a little bit about that?
Yeah, but I think, again, we are confusing two different things. The flu virus is changing every year, and the coronaviruses, as a family, we know this family, they are very stable viruses. So if we have an efficient vaccine, it will keep being efficient for many years. And I'll explain now what this means. So this is with regard to, if we have a good vaccine, it will be a good vaccine. We are not expecting the coronavirus to change and then making us going into this flu thing that every year we need to find a vaccine. But the one thing we don't know about this virus is if we get infected or if we get the vaccine, are the antibodies and the immune response we have is a lifetime response? Are we immune completely? Or is it slowly going down and then we can be reinfected? And this is something that it's hard to predict. I have to say, from looking at, there are some really good studies, and so maybe not everyone know it, but we have 4 coronaviruses that are infecting us all the time. And they just generate, cold. We don't seriously consider them as disease, and actually there were not really studies so much because no one really cared about them. And from studies looking at these coronaviruses, it does look like the immune response is declining with time. There is a really good paper showing that for the other coronaviruses, the human coronavirus, the antibodies last for around 2 years, and then they go down, and then you can be reinfected. I think what this means potentially is that maybe we'll need to be vaccinated every 2 years, but it will be the same vaccine. You don't need to generate a new vaccine. You don't need to invent something new. But this is just a prediction. We can learn that the immunity lasts for a lifetime. Also, we should remember that the immunity we get from vaccine could be very different than immunity we get from getting infected. It could be better. It could be weaker. And so this is actually something that time will tell us. But even if the vaccine is not for lifetime, I think we are in a different place.
Okay.
Because we have the vaccine in hand, and it will be just something you need to do every few years.
Like we do flu vaccine every couple of years or every year.
At
Yes.
least for the time being.
But it will be more simple because it's the same vaccine. We don't, the flu, there is a lot of
changes.
Yeah.
I want to take you back a little bit for lower tech.
Okay.
There, you see a lot of people are debating the value of hand washing, the value of gloves or not gloving. There's a debate about how long the virus will live on various surfaces. There's a debate about what potency of mask you need, whether everyone needs an N95, whether you can get by with a surgical mask. So I just want to make one comment. In our hospital, we were at a COVID's hospital. We had, everyone in the hospital was wearing the surgical mask. Only in the ICU were we wearing the 95s. And we didn't have any infection in any of the staff if they were wearing the regular surgical masks. That's our personal experience in 2 hospitals. So in terms of masks, many of us think we don't need the N95s unless we're doing the very aggressive procedures of intubation or directly in the face of someone who has a virulent infection. So what do you think about the role of gloves? What do you think about the role of transmission by particles?
Okay, so I'll start by surface infection. So, and this with regard to gloves and washing hands. Personally, for example, for my kids, I don't ask them to wear gloves, but I do really try to use this time to try and teach them that they need to efficiently wash their hands, and this can really help. But so, and it's very practical and easy, so I'm in favor of doing it. But I don't think there is really a lot of evidence for infection from surfaces. I think most of the infections, it's quite clear, are coming from person-to-person contact. And so this means that we need to wash our hands, but probably this is not going to solve the problem. With regard to masks, again, I think there is if you want complete protection, the N95 is the one that will protect you. But I think what the masks are really important for is that if I'm carrying coronavirus, it will really prevent it from being spread. And therefore, if everyone is wearing, or at least almost everyone is wearing a mask, it's almost like herd immunity, right? Yeah. If I have a mask, I will not, or the chances I will infect someone are really drastically dropping, and then no one else needs to wear N95 because I'm wearing a mask. So if everyone will wear a mask, surgical masks, that should be more than enough. I do think if people have the money and they want to feel more secure, they can wear the N95 masks, but it's not an obligated, like it's not something that you must do.
It seems to me that I want to get to something that pertains to you personally in a minute, but it seems to me that at the present time and for the foreseeable future, our ability to do simple things, like make sure that like Josie said, that make sure the people we're encountering are not infected, protecting with masks, protecting with hand washings, until the social distancing, whether it's a meter or 2, depending on what country you're in, this may likely to tide us over until the vaccines come through or the drugs come through.
For sure. I think, again, what you're saying now for sure will solve the problem. I think the issue is, for example, schools. Young kids, they are not going to social distance. And so I think or restaurants, bars, by definition, you eat in a restaurant, right? Weddings. So in Israel, for example, right now, it seems like the worst thing that happened is that they allowed weddings and big ceremonies to occur. And first, it's many people in a closed area. And second, it's also people coming from different, cities, villages. So it's like also spreading it all over the country. It's not even local anymore, so it's really hard to control. So I think it's clear in working places, outside, we need to be social distancing. I think the questions are more about places that by definition you cannot social distance. What do you do in these places? Do you close them completely? Do you put regulations? Yeah, but restaurants you can't really.
Parks. The kids are in the parks.
And the kids, I mean, I have a 2 years old that doesn't wear a mask, a 6 and a 9 that do wear a mask. And I have to say, you know, they don't wear a mask the same way we are wearing it.
Yeah.
And it's almost not realistic to think that they do, because it's not going to happen.
I want to ask you a question. You have won a number of awards. One of them a very prestigious award for advancing women in science. The world is upside down now. How is your career, the career of the women you're mentoring, sort of being affected by this virus? The virus is doing many things. That may be one of them.
I think the virus is taking us backwards in so many different fronts. And this is one front that I feel like going in reverse. So there is no question in my lab and everywhere I see women paying a much bigger price with dealing with all the cultural things around the COVID-19, specifically, you know, when the kids are not going to school or to daycare. I mean, I see it in my lab. I have to say I have a terrific partner, and this is why I think I'm a successful scientist, that we are really sharing the bargain, like the care of the children when there is COVID-19 or when there isn't. And it's clear to my husband that, you know, if the kids are not going to school or to daycare, that we are solving it between us. But sadly, this is not a situation, at least in Israel, I think in 95% of the families. And there is no...
here too, many times here too.
No question paying the price.
Noam, if I can take you back to when you won the award, so pre-COVID, talk to us a little bit about what that means to you, and I'll tell you why. At Weitzman Canada, we've been for many years raising awareness and support for that particular award, and we're very proud of all of the women scientists we've empowered. So I'd love to hear a little bit before we wrap up for the day of how you felt when you won that award and what it meant to you.
First, of course, I felt great. And thank you very much for everyone that contributed. I think, again, it helps in two different levels. First, on the practical level, going at least from Israel to the US or to the Canada, where usually you do a postdoc, it's usually very expensive, especially the high league universities are sitting in expensive cities. And if you have kids, this is a big financial move. And so if you have the extra support, it helps, you know, to leverage some of the stress and make it more feasible, specifically for women to, you know, ask their husband in a way to leave their career in Israel and to move with them abroad. So that's on a practical level. But I also think women have another problem, and this is less self-confidence about their abilities to succeed. And I think if you get acknowledged in this kind of a world that people actually really think you're worth spending money on, then it's also really motivates you and make you want to try and work it out. So I think it's a really important contribution, and specifically in science, I think just encouraging women to continue and giving money is one way, but there are other ways is really, really important. And I see it now in my lab. It's really, really sad, I have to say, that you see really talented students, female students, and they just don't want to continue.
I think we have to do lots to reverse that.
Yes.
I think science globally, whether it's women or men, needs to be fostered, because at the end of the day, the truth comes out. And the truth about biology must be found, because that gives us the tools to advance humanity.
I think.
Yes, and balance, you know, as you said, is so important. And Anyways, I could go on talking for hours, but I do want to wrap up and thank everyone for their time. So
Thank you
Noam,
very much.
Adrian, Josie, thank you so much for making the time to share great information with us. Really, what a great conversation. And to all of you who joined us today, we're so grateful for your interest and for your support. For over 30 years, Weitzman Canada has proudly been championing women in the scientific arena. And this was started by the vision of the late Marvell Koffler of blessed memory, who we sadly lost earlier this year. Her legacy, however, lives on as a national initiative. Since the world has been hit with this pandemic, the need to promote and empower girls and women in science has become even more great. And as we said, balance is really important. And in the coming months, you'll all read more about the Women for Science initiative. So looking forward to that. We want to create more role models like you, Noam, a woman, a mother, a leading scientist. So bravo to you. And to everyone, we hope you'll continue to stay in touch via our website and your favorite social media platform. And we look forward to having you participate in future Weitzman Canada events. In the meantime, stay safe, stay well, wear your mask, and thank you once again from all of us to all of you.